Hey, welcome to the Christian Media Marketing Show. My name is John. Thanks for hanging out with me today. It's good to be with you. I do wish that I was able to spend more time physically with some of you that have been a part of this tribe. Some of us just get to see each other sometimes at a conference or occasionally on a Zoom call. And I miss that. That's one of the things that as Kavanaugh has grown that I miss, which is a lot of that just hands-on, down in the weeds, getting to do a lot of the marketing sometimes. And so if you're at some place where I'm at, or if you just feel about it, reach out sometime. I'd love to just hear from you, hear how God is blessing your efforts. We are in a really just quite a time in the world. And I actually just finished a call with the team working over in Israel right now. And the reality of just the world, of the lack of peace, of the challenges that are there struck home talking to this person, seeing how their Google ads were doing, seeing how their YouTube and their Facebook ads were doing, and to see just not just political, but just the climate of the world, the animosity, war, the lack of peace, the lack of knowing who Jesus is, the lack of civility among people. And just this is our world that we're in right now. And I believe with all of my heart that the world needs Jesus. He is the Prince of Peace. He's the one that can bring true peace, not just the lack of war, that he can mend hearts and he can make people become like family. He can help us work through so much. And I think a lot of what we see in the world today is representative of the fact that Jesus is not there. A lot of people claim him, a lot of people use his name, but to really be following him, to really have him deeply in our hearts to the point that the ways of the world just aren't our ways. The things that we do don't look like the things that other people do, that we look different, that we are different, that our kingdom, our tribe, our group, our family is not of this world. It's a spiritual one. I was at a very large organization this last week sharing with some of their leaders about just digital engagement itself. And one of the things, as we were talking through cybersecurity risk and all of those aspects of digital engagement, one of the things that I shared with them was just the spiritual dynamic that we see over and over is that when we run lots of ads for the missionaries and teams that we get to serve, the more we are taking it to, say, our spiritual enemy, the more those spiritual attacks ramp up. And those attacks look different at different times. And so for us, and for me at least, it's just a lot of spiritual warfare, discouragement, lack of resources, all sorts of things that just show up that are there to try to get me to get my mind off of the mission, to begin to doubt, to have fear, whatever that might be. I don't know if you face the same kind of ones or how he attacks you, but I do know that it's important for us to always be pushing forward and to understand that what we're doing is a spiritual endeavor. Now, in today's episode, and then in next week's as well, I'm going to be talking through some just some ideas that I have about both when you're chatting with the person online with your responders, and then when it moves from online to potentially offline, or as I'll share in next week's episode, to what I'm calling just pre groups. So maybe stepping stones and ways of being able to do that. So I want to give you three things today for your responders to be, and not to quote Shakespeare too much here, but to not to be as we think about how we respond to people. Now, before we even get started here, different groups and people call this different things, right? This person who is the first one to see these comments, to see these private messages coming in, we call them a responder. Others call them a filterer, and I understand why. I understand there's different terms. I still use the term responder, and that's because filtering is only one part of what we're asking of these online responders, in our case, to do. We're asking them to respond. We're asking them to respond quickly and to be prepared and to be like Jesus. And yes, there is filtering because there's lots of negative messages that come in. And yes, we're filtering for obedience and we're looking to see who really is seeking. So that's a very important part of it. It's just not the only part of it. And so we just use that broader term, but whichever one you use, it's fine. It doesn't matter. In many ways, it's just semantics. All right. So, however that is, we have now so many people all around the world that are doing this who are our responders for both our Discover Jesus initiatives and for the organizations that we serve and the mission organizations. And so hundreds of different people are online on their phones, on their computers, responding back when people make comments. It could be something just simple like amen. It could be a private message. It could be an emoji. It could be a lot of things. But let me give you 3 things that I would love to see responders do. All right. So while you're in the midst of that conversation, I think it's important to be a detective and not a prosecutor. And so what I mean by that is that I think it's important to be asking questions. Now, it's not an inquisition. Don't ask too many of them, but find out what brings that person there. What do they think about this? Have they read this? Would they like it? So it's permission based. I see this in Jesus's example of his ministry a lot. He actually asked a lot of questions. People would come to him with a question and he would turn it back and ask them a question. And that helped really set the stage for that conversation itself. And so think through those first few bits as you're getting started. Really look beyond the initial question they might put or comment to the question behind the question. What is it that they're really looking for? And they may not have the right words to describe it. They may not even know. It may have been a vision that God gave them, a dream. It could be that they've heard somebody else. It could be something in the video or the picture or your social media post. Who knows how the Spirit worked through it? But I would say it's important to be a detective, be asking questions. A prosecutor is coming at somebody. All right, they're going really hard there. That's not what we're trying to do here. We're just trying to help them and find these answers. And the way we do that is walking alongside of them and asking questions. Great example of this is the Ethiopian eunuch. And in the book of Acts, Philip comes up alongside of this person and asks him, do you understand what you're reading? And so he didn't just go, what you're reading there is this, and give him, he started with questions. Jesus did this. Philip did this. Others do this. I think this is an important thing. Okay. So be asking questions. And even if they give you, let's say, a prayer request, be asking questions beyond that. Uh, can we follow back up on this? Can we check back with you in a couple of days to see how it's going? Would you reach back and let us know? Be permission based, be asking questions. All right. The second thing is to be a guide, not a traffic cop. And what I mean by that is I think it's important for us to think about steps for that person. And so a traffic cop is just going to point one direction and say, you go this way. But a guide comes alongside the person who's on that journey. And the guide is going and walking with them and they're pointing out things. They're saying, hey, be careful over here and watch out for this, or you might want to see this here. That's important, even from the very beginning. We're establishing a DNA here. We're establishing a culture from the very beginning, first point of contact, where we want that seeker to be thinking about not just themselves, but my hope is that they'll be thinking about friends and family and others who might want to study. We're wanting them to think about then what is that next small step, not jumps, just steps for them. So sometimes we can just be a traffic cop and say, okay, go here and read this. But instead, give that extra little bit to help them say, maybe you should read this. Would this interest you? Because I think this is something that, of what you're saying, that Jesus talks about that might be of benefit. Would you be willing to read it? I'm asking questions, getting permission. I'm saying something to the extent of Jesus taught about this, or I have a video of Jesus's teaching about this, or in the Bible it talks about this. Would you like to see it or read it? And then give them ideas about what to do with it. All right. How to handle that content. Don't just go, well, here's a Bible. Good luck. Really walk alongside of them. You can do this online, even with those beginning seekers. Right? So give them small steps, give them something to read, maybe the first 5 books of Matthew or the 21 chapters of John. Here, read a chapter a day, but come back. Let's talk some about what questions you have, what you're discovering, what you like or don't like. Give them ways to process that information. All right. Third thing to be and to not be here is to be a friend, not a celebrity. And by that, a friend is someone who listens and responds. All right. This is someone who doesn't come with an agenda beyond just, I want to be with this other person. This is why I view partnership so important, because in partnership, you're thinking about the other person. How can I be a blessing to them? How can I bring a blessing to them instead of what can I get from this relationship? That's just completely different. A friend is someone who doesn't send you a WhatsApp message only when they need something. A friend is someone who's just reaching out going, hey, I prayed for you today, or how can I be prayed for you today? They listen, they're talking, they care. That's what we need to be doing here, is to be a friend. A celebrity is someone who doesn't respond. They're just someone who's giving them a quick answer, but they're not really there having a dialogue with that other person. I love sports. I love watching sports. I got to go watch a baseball game just a couple days ago with my oldest son. It was a blast to be able to do that. But there was a big difference between the friends who went to the baseball game and the people who were interviewing the baseball players. They had questions, there was conversation, there was dialogue, but it was not to the same level. A celebrity may answer a question, a celebrity may hear the question from that other person and answer it, but they're not going on to that more part to really listen to that other person and to ask questions of them and to really get to understand what is the heart of what it is that they're looking for. What is it that they're feeling? So part of the way we can do this is we can understand what kind of prepared questions that other people are going to have, what kind of questions they're going to come, and we can prepare our answers to them and just resources to them to help them find answers, to help them get a Bible in their own translation, to help them to do so much more. And there's a few tools that we use a lot. One of those is the Next Steps tool. And so it is a brand new tool that Jesus Film has been rolling out. They just announced a new way of working even with it. If you go, there's a playbook by Kavanaugh on prayer that we've helped develop with them. There's so much to it. The reason I like it is because as we're going through being a detective, being a guide, being a friend for people, we already are thinking ahead to the pain points that they're going to have. And we're thinking through, how would Jesus respond? What would Jesus give to them? And Next Steps allows us to have very small, bite-sized next steps of content related to what that other person who is seeking is thinking or feeling or asking about. So I highly recommend it. You can go to and just search for, you can come to us. We'll give you the link directly to it. It's just great, a great tool. You'll see the URL here on the screen as well. It's just a great one. So I highly recommend Next Steps from the Jesus Film Project people. And so the final thing I want to share with you as you're doing all of this, as you're being a detective, as you're being a guide, as you are really being a friend to them, is to remember that your audience possibly is very, very skeptical. They're not so sure. They don't know who you are. Maybe they're in a very hostile land towards Christianity. And so when you give your audience tons of reasons, all right, when you give them all sorts of different kinds of evidence and multiple steps and all of these kind of things, we give them and we trigger within them this awareness that someone's trying to persuade them. All right. So what I'm not encouraging you through this process is to sit there and say, okay, well, I'm going to give you this, 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 this. Here's 6 reasons why Jesus is right or why the Bible is not corrupt or whatever. Because when you do that, people will shield themselves. They'll realize you have an agenda. You're not really listening. You're not thinking about them. You're trying to persuade them. And so if you push, people will push back. That's for sure. And so a single line, a single bit of steps of an argument for Jesus or some sort of information, one bit feels like a conversation. But if you're doing multiple lines of arguments or defenses, well, that can feel like an onslaught and people don't like it. All right. So think about the other person. Think about that audience. Think about what would make them scared or skeptical or unsure and speak like Jesus to them. All right? It's just really important to always be thinking about that fact that that's what ultimately we are to be, is we need to be Jesus to them. All right. So there are 3 things that I think is important for your responders to be and not to be, and some other thoughts there about even some tools that we find very, very useful. I hope it's a benefit to you. That is our desire, is to serve the kingdom, to serve you as you make Jesus famous. And so keep pressing forward. Next week, Lord willing, I'm going to share that process of moving from this point where you're having online conversations to what comes next in this seeker journey and utilizing disciple tools is going to be one of them, and some other things that I'm going to share about. So looking forward to share with you next week. Thank you again for hanging out with me today. May God bless all of your efforts to make his son famous. Until next time, take care and God bless.